Welcome back. In this video we are going to talk about passing arrays into functions. And this video assumes you have reviewed the first 3 videos on functions. So let's get started. First, let's talk about how to optimize passing vectors and strings to functions. This is simply achieved by passing the vector and/or string object as a reference parameter. And if we want to ensure that we do not modify the object, we precede the parameter type with the reserved word const. We don't want to pass a copy because that is inefficient. That will take up a lot of the computer time just copying the vector. But we don't necessarily want to modify the vector. We want to only read the vector. As in our case that we see in our print student scores that we discussed in video 2, I believe, of functions. Luckily, in this case, my vector of students was small. It was only 5 or 6 students. But let's say there were thousands of students. In this case, this parameter is passed by value. So if we have thousands or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of students, we are creating huge overhead just to copy the student vector into a copy of the student vector. But in this case, all we want to do is access the student vector. We are not going to modify it. We can make this more efficient by passing by reference. Now remember, pass by reference means you are passing the physical memory address of whatever object or thing you are pointing at. As it stands right now, print student scores is passing a copy of the vector. We turn this into a reference parameter by adding an ampersand at the end. So this passes the exact memory location of where the student's vector, the input value, is. Now we do not want to modify the student's vector, nor do we want to modify the grades vector. So we have an option here to prevent us from even making a mistake and modifying it. If we precede the type with const, we are passing by reference. However, we are ensuring that we do not update either of the 2 parameters in this case. This also works for strings. If we are passing a large string, all we do is pass by reference, put const in front of it. That means it is a read-only string. I'm going to run this program so you can see that it runs normally. Alright, it still runs. So we're okay. Just remember, if we want to pass a vector or a string, it's more efficient. It takes less computer time if we pass by reference. If we are not going to modify the vector or string at all, be sure to precede the type with const. Now let's get on with arrays, passing arrays to functions. Remember we discussed this array swap program. And remember the code in line 23 to 31 is very similar, well, it's identical to lines 44 to 52. Let's make this into a function, shall we? Arrays are a little more tricky than passing anything else because arrays by default are passed by reference. Let's create our function void. What do we call this? Let's call this print array. Print array. Because that's what we're doing. We're printing the array contents. We are going to pass the array it is an integer array, and we specify its array by putting open close brackets. So I'm passing an array. The other thing we have to do with an array, we have to pass the size, because there's no way to retrieve the size once we start the function. Have my curlies, have my code here. I'm just going to copy this code. Now we can see here max size has a red squiggly. So does numbers. But numbers is the parameter. Let's fix that right now. ARRY. ARRY. Now max size has a squiggly, but we've declared a constant of max size. But where did we create the constant? We created the constant in main. So remember, this is another scoping issue. We declared const max size in main. Therefore, max size only is visible between this curly brace and this curly brace. It's not visible anywhere else. Why don't we make this constant available to everywhere in this file, meaning all the functions in the file? I'm going to move this up here. Now, since this constant is defined outside of main and outside any function, it's considered global. So max size is available in any function within this file. We have two functions in this file, print array and main. Let's convert this into a call of the function. So let's just call print array. We'll pass it the numbers array, and we'll pass it the size of the numbers. Well, let's just pick max size and add our semicolon. Now this endl is actually been put into the function. I want to go back up here to our function. Having max size in the print array function is not a good idea, because what if our current size of the array is 12, but our max size is 25? We don't want to display all 25 elements. We only want to display the current size of the array, 12. So having max size here is not a good idea, and besides, we are passing as a parameter the size. So let's change this to size. Of course, we want to add comments. I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you. Now when we run the program, we're going to print out the contents of the array using the function, and I'm going to leave the for loop here so you can see we're doing the same thing. I'm going to Control F5 and I have errors. So let's see where my errors are. I is undeclared. Let's go over here. And of course I is undeclared. Let's declare it now. Int I. Let's try again. You can see the output isn't what we expect. You can tell by looking at line 28 that I am using the numbers array with only 4 elements. I really want to use line 28, so let's correct that. I will Control F5 again, and I see 1 through 25, 25 down to 1. Now I'm assured my function is working, so I could just delete this and let me only delete this part of it and copy this down to here. So you can see how creating functions makes this more readable. It's code, because when I'm in main, I do my initialization, I print out the array, then I manipulate the array and print out the array again. But this manipulation of the array requires some comments. Swap the first element in the array with the last. Continue until all elements are swapped. So let's run this again, and we'll see by using functions it's more readable and more maintainable because my code only exists in one place. There's the code. We've already made sure this code is correct and functions correctly in our previous exercise. So I'm going to say we're okay with this code, and we've actually made our code to swap elements in the array much more simple. This concludes the video on passing arrays to functions.